Welcome to Mill History Talk, the podcast where we explore the past to better understand the profession of arms today. We dive into the campaigns, conflicts, issues, and commanders that have shaped military thinking across centuries, and why it all still matters. Whether you're an officer in training, a seasoned professional, a student of strategy, or simply curious about how history informs modern warfare, this space is for you. Our mission is simple: to foster insight, reflection, and critical thinking primarily through the lens of military history. Before we begin, a quick note. The views expressed in this podcast are of the podcast writers, hosts, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any government agency or organization. So, whether you're listening in a barracks, a lecture hall, at the gym, or in your car on the way to work, welcome. We're glad you're here. Hey everyone, I'm Hope, your smart, sassy, slightly nerdy tour guide through the battlefields of history. This is Mill History Talk, episode 43, where we unpack the drama, the strategies, and the not-so-glorious screw-ups that shaped our world. Today, we're diving into how the United States went from, we're not ready, to arsenal of democracy in, wait for it, about 18 months. Yes, faster than your last attempt at a New Year's resolution.
I'm Brian, and look, mobilization isn't a montage. There's no quick cut from a rusty factory to a gleaming bomber line. It took political maneuvering, new laws, new agencies, and a lot of arguing. But by December 7th, 1941, the United States had the skeleton of a war machine ready to add muscle. Not perfect, just ready to become ready.
Think of it like preheating the oven. The cookies aren't baked yet, but the heat's on, the racks are in, and someone already mixed a gallon of dough. Oh, and now I want cookies. The wake-up call? France falls in June 1940. Suddenly, the U.S. is staring at a world where Britain might stand alone, then maybe fall, and we're next on the playlist. Roosevelt feels the clock start screaming. In his June 1940 messages, he's basically, "This changes everything. Expand production now."
Politically, America's still deeply isolationist. The America First movement is loud, Congress is cautious, and Roosevelt knows a frontal push for war won't fly. So he opts for incremental mobilization. Frame each step as defense, not intervention. And he builds new coordinating machinery inside the government to make that happen.
Enter the bureaucratic Avengers, the Office of Emergency Management, and an advisory commission in May 1940. Then the beefed-up Office of Production Management in January 1941. It's messy, overlapping turf wars, but also the early scaffolding for the War Production Board. Translation? The spreadsheets get their own chain of command.
And the rhetoric shifts too. Roosevelt's Arsenal of Democracy fireside chat on December 29, 1940, makes the case that American industry must back those fighting aggression, without saying, "We're at war." Politically careful, strategically blunt.
Okay, the legal toolkit. First, they loosen the Neutrality Acts. Cash and carry sales in late 1939 let Britain and France buy arms with their own ships and money. Baby steps, but they matter.
Big steps come in 1940. Congress passes the Selective Training and Service Act, first peacetime draft in U.S. history. It registers men 21 to 35, sets up a one-year training service pipeline, and establishes the administrative machine that will move millions. Initial registration day, October 16, 1940, produces over 16 million names. That's a nation getting serious.
Next up, the Two-Ocean Navy Act, July 1940. Picture a shopping list written by Poseidon: 18 carriers, 7 battleships, 33 cruisers, 115 destroyers, 43 submarines, plus auxiliaries. It's a 70% fleet increase, because we might have to fight in the Pacific and the Atlantic at once. No pressure.
And to make all this work, the White House creates the Supply Priorities and Allocations Board in August 1941, deciding who gets steel, aluminum, copper machines, and when. It's an interim step before the War Production Board, but it signals central direction is now the norm, not the exception.
TLDR. The laws unlock people, ships, and the power to decide what gets built first. Or, as my grandpa put it, you can't bake without flour, and you can't bake faster without someone assigning you the oven.
The U.S. had enormous latent industrial strength in 1939. Factories, skills, resources. But it wasn't pointed at war. Mobilization redirects that engine. Think machine tools. Without them, nothing else scales. Output surges as the government funds new capacity and long-run contracts. It's the hidden backbone behind bombers, tanks, and ships.
Auto companies become defense MVPs. Ford builds the Willow Run bomber plant. GM and Chrysler pivot to engines, trucks, and tanks. The Detroit Arsenal tank plant ramps up production, often in government-owned, contractor-operated facilities. GoCo sounds like a rideshare. It's actually how you bootstrap capacity quickly.
Materials are a constant choke point. Aluminum for aircraft, steel plate for ships, rubber looming as a crisis. The state's role is to finance plants, allocate scarce inputs, and smooth bottlenecks until the curve bends upward. The result? The U.S. can start promising allies and its own services that the pipeline will fill soon.
And if you're picturing a flawless assembly line, slow your roll. Early production is lumpy. Schedules slip. Labor has to be retrained, and the new agencies sometimes deadlock. But it's still a giant step from not ready to almost ready to explode in volume. Now let's talk the human piece. Draft cards flood in, but deferments keep key workers in critical plants. That's the constant trade-off. Send the welder to a rifle company or keep him welding ships. The policy leans heavily toward keeping industry humming.
Meanwhile, the Army grows from under 200,000 to over 1.6 million by December 1941. Regulars, Guard, and draftees. Training centers explode in size. Benning, Knox, Leonard Wood, Roberts, and the Army starts practicing combined arms instead of treating tanks as just armored escorts.
It's not all parade ground perfection. Shortages of radios, modern tanks, and instructors mean some units train with older gear, and large maneuvers expose real weaknesses: logistics, command control, air-ground coordination. That honesty check is painful and priceless.
Now, let's switch to building an air force on the fly.
Pun intended?
What? Oh, yeah. Roosevelt is ambitious when it comes to air power and sets an audacious target: 50,000 planes a year. It jolts the system, but air power is more than fuselages. You need pilots, navigators, bombardiers, mechanics, trainers, and fields where they can fly almost every day. The Army Air Forces build out a vast training pipeline and an airfield construction boom across the South and West.
Civilian flying schools handle primary training under contract. The military leans into advanced instruction. It's clever scaling before scaling was a buzzword. Still, bottlenecks nag. Shortages of advanced trainers, engine production hiccups, so some cadets fly older birds longer.
But the trajectory is set. Airfields, training syllabi, and procurement pipelines exist by late 41. The numbers haven't peaked, but the machinery to get there has. That's the quiet miracle.
Back to that Poseidon shopping list. The Two Ocean Navy Act doesn't just imagine a bigger fleet. It funds it. Carriers, destroyers, subs, plus the yard expansions, dry docks, and workers to actually build them. It's the wet side version of move fast and build things.
Merchant shipping expands too, under the U.S. Maritime Commission. Standardized cargo ships, what become the Liberty ships, are conceived in this pre-war window. The first, the SS Patrick Henry, launches in September 1941. The real mass wave comes later, But the templates, yards, and training pipelines are already in motion.
There's a human lag at sea as well. Shipbuilding outruns crew training, so some vessels head out with green sailors and technicians learning on the job. Not ideal, but when the build curve is this steep, some parts of the system are always catching up.
Then the pivot from domestic prep to global commitment. Lend-Lease. Introduced January 10, 1941. It authorizes the president to provide defense articles to nations whose defense is vital to U.S. security, starting with Britain, then, after June 1941, the Soviet Union under the First Protocol. It's controversial in Congress, but it passes and becomes law on March 11, 1941.
Harry Hopkins runs the new Office of Lend-Lease Administration. He's Roosevelt's trusted fixer. And suddenly, American production is being planned on a global scale. Planes, trucks, food, raw materials flowing to Britain. Then allocations for the USSR, plus smaller but symbolically big aid to China and others. It's arsenal of democracy, now with tracking numbers.
Strategically, Lend-Lease forces hard choices. The new Supply Priorities and Allocations Board has to balance U.S. rearmament against Allied needs. It causes friction, but Roosevelt keeps the aid flowing, even while domestic forces are still building out. That pressure accelerates U.S. mobilization rather than slows it.
And Lend-Lease isn't just boxes on docks, it's ships and escorts in harm's way. By mid-1941, the U.S. Navy is escorting in the Western Atlantic. The Carney is torpedoed, and the Reuben James is sunk in October. America isn't formally at war yet, but we're undeniably in it.
The bigger picture, Lend-Lease intertwines foreign policy with mobilization. It justifies massive plant investment, pushes standardization, and institutionalizes U.S.-British planning mechanisms that will become the combined chiefs of staff architecture after entry. It's a dry phrase for a profound shift.
So, by the morning of Pearl Harbor, where are we? Not fully ready. Let's not mythologize this. Some divisions lack modern gear. Pilot training isn't at wartime throughput. New ships sail with green crews. But the scaffolding, the laws, the agencies, the factories, the training systems is in place. Flip the wartime switch, and the system can surge.
The U.S. is fundamentally prepared to become ready, and fast. The miracle of 1942 to 45 is less miracle than momentum meeting resources and coordination already built under pressure in 1940 to 41. The cookies still had to bake, but the oven was blazing.
Myth. America only mobilized after Pearl Harbor. Reality. The pivot started in 1940. Draft, shipbuilding, agencies, Lend-Lease, because planners feared a world where we'd face the Axis alone.
Myth. Industry just flipped a switch. Reality. Machine tool expansion, GOCO plants, and allocation boards were the unglamorous preconditions that made the wartime surge possible.
Myth. Naval and air power were already dominant. Reality. Designs and fields were there. Crews and throughput lagged, but the pipelines were real. And that's our sprint through how America preheated the oven before the dough even hit the tray. Draft boards humming, machine tools multiplying, and agencies wrestling the parts list into order. The arsenal of democracy wasn't magic. It was planning, priorities, and a lot of sweaty factory floors. And here's the modern kicker. If you expect large-scale combat against a peer, your strategic base has to spin up at the same rate as your combat power. You can't wait for the first shot to start thinking logistics. You build that spine before the bell rings.
By December 41, the system wasn't finished, but the scaffolding was up. 2 Ocean Navy funded, airfields laid out, GOCO plants spinning, and Lend-Lease tying our fate to the Allies. That's the quiet power behind the wartime surge, and the lesson for LSCO today. Strategic logistics must be ready to move in lockstep with combat capability, or the fight outruns the sustainment.
If today sharpened your picture of mobilization, share the episode with a friend who thinks history starts at Pearl Harbor. Flex your new fact at dinner. Bonus points if you work machine tool capacity and pre-war strategic logistics into a sentence.
Follow the show by subscribing and catch the next episode, where we track how those pipelines crank into wartime volume and what that means for modern force generation.
I'm Hope, he's Brian, and this was Mill History Talk. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep your priorities straight, your logistics tighter, and don't let a bottleneck rent space in your head, and keep plenty of space open for raw materials. Catch you on the next episode.